remaining COVID restrictions could be lifted in just a couple of weeks, including scrapping isolation rules for those who test positive for COVID.
Well, it's the story dominating a number of the front pages this morning, with them declaring freedom for England and the end of the pandemic.
But are we moving too quickly? Joining us now to discuss this, we have Professor of Oncology at St George's Hospital, Angus Dalgleish, and the Chair of Global Public Health at the Edinburgh University, Professor Devi Sridhar. Good morning to both of you. Thank you for joining us. Professor Sridhar, if we could start with you, how do you feel about the COVID rules and regulations changing so dramatically?
Well, I think on the positive side, we've seen massive progress in lifting restrictions. But isolation is there to avoid someone who's infectious infecting someone else. I actually see it as a public health protection in the same way we have smoking laws against indoor smoking and laws against driving when you're under the influence or you've drunk too much, or speed limits. We're basically trying to create a safer society. And this is still a disease that's killing, over 200 people on average a day. So we have to move towards, I think at some point, yes, we will lift isolation. It's just whether right now is the moment or we should wait a couple weeks, see how the pandemic progresses, learn about waning immunity, and then move forward.
I think what people will find difficult to mentally manage is the idea that people with active COVID testing positive, being in potentially close contact with them. There are other people, though, who say, actually, Omicron and, anecdotally from friends and family, the symptoms this time are not that serious. They are not as debilitating as normal flu, or they don't appear so anyway. So why not allow the economy to recover when we're facing a cost of living crisis and let people get out and get on with things? What would you say to that?
Well, I think the first thing to say is, yes, Omicron is milder than Delta, but it's not a mild disease. In the unvaccinated, it is still killing people. Just look at the United States. Over 4,000, almost 4,000 people died yesterday. They're going to reach 1 million death toll. And here in Britain, we're lucky people have taken up the booster. But even then, while we've defanged it, taken out the poison, it can still bite you. This is still a nasty virus that is knocking people out for a couple of weeks and, can lead to longer term symptoms. So yes, I think we need to open up. We are having strong economic recovery. We are having nightclubs open. You've released masks in England. Life looks pretty normal. But the last thing that should be left to release is telling people who are actively infectious, that's okay for you to go into a nightclub, into a gym, into work. I think the approach now of using lateral flow tests to ask people to test, and on day 5 or day 6, if you're negative, say, okay, you can go back to work. That's quite, I think, a rational approach, which is if you're actively infectious with a high viral load, stay home. If you're not, you can go back to work or get back to seeing your friends.
OK. Professor Dalgleish, if we can come to you, a lot of our viewers, the vast majority of our viewers this morning are getting in touch saying they are very concerned about this. A number of them, of course, dealing with underlying health conditions as well. Cheryl, London, Norma, she says she has immunosuppressed. Ruth has lupus. How can they assure me that if I go out and about, I'm not going to come across somebody who could make me very ill indeed? And that is the real concern. As Professor Sridhar says, this virus is still killing 200 people a day.
Well, first of all, I want to put it in context that this virus is much milder now than it used to be. It is very, very infectious, and I don't think we can control it. We can do very much about the way it spreads from person to person. If you really want to avoid it, you do have to self-isolate yourself, and that's up to you if you're very vulnerable. But for everybody else, I think it's a blessing in disguise, because it is actually infecting people, giving them a superb extra immunity and allowing them to get on with their lives. I personally would encourage people who are infected to mix. And I say that not flippantly, but because I've observed it. I've observed it in the hospitals, the universities where I work, that so many people have been infected since Christmas that it's all been mild. I can only think of one exception where it was rather bad in one of my colleagues, but it was no worse than the usual flu. I mean, I've been a physician, I've been an internal physician doing take, but till not that long ago. And it was always the case that we saw people coming in with severe pneumonia, with on the top of flu. It was there. And I think that it was very, I was really embarrassed at the way SAGE and our senior colleagues, our merchants of doom, basically ignored the South Africans. It was very clear that the South Africans were very, very objective about this. They saw a virus that was far more infectious, but did not have any worse side effects. In fact, it was much, much less. And actually, it didn't matter whether you were vaccinated, which is only 20% in South Africa, or unvaccinated. It was no difference. There was no difference. So the idea of worrying about the state of vaccination, etc., I don't think should be a concern, and that people should not be worried. I think it's virtually impossible to go out without having been exposed to this virus. So the quicker at the end game is over, the better. And remember, all these upper respiratory tract viruses like coronavirus, they go in waves. They're inevitable. And it makes no difference.
The problem is, though, Professor Dalglish, just because I want to give Professor Sridhar a chance to come back in as well, is that, you know, I know from my own experience, from conversation with doctors yesterday, you're still talking about it as an upper respiratory tract infection. The damage that's caused widespread throughout the body and the nervous system is still not clear. So I guess the fear for those is that we still don't know enough, and to be actively mixing with people who are positive and infectious is still a risk.
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, I would, if you don't mind.
Yeah. That everything you say was completely and utterly true when we had the Alpha and the Delta variants. But this variant is completely and utterly different. Everybody has got some type of immunity now, whether it be natural or vaccinated. So along comes Omicron. It's not good enough to completely prevent it. But the infection, it is covered, it's contained by the immune response, and the symptoms are mild. Omicron is not giving you the dreadful side effects that we got from the Alpha and the Delta.
Okay.
And what the good thing is, it's driving out all the others. Because it's so infectious, it's driving out Delta. Delta's been put to bed, Alpha's been put to bed, and this is a much nicer infection to live with. And I think we mustn't lose sight of the overall picture in this.
Let's go to Professor Sridhar on that. Nice, was an interesting description. Professor Sridhar, what do you make of the idea that Professor Dalglish was saying that if you are positive, I think you should go out there and you should mix, a bit like the old measles parties when we were growing up as kids?
I think that's quite dangerous, actually. Also, the message that it doesn't matter if you're vaccinated. It hugely matters if you're vaccinated and boosted. If you look at the United States, the reason they're facing thousands of deaths a day is because people believe misinformation online and are not getting vaccinated and boosted. Luckily, we don't have that problem in Britain. I also want to take on this issue
from Omicron, because that's his point, isn't it?
It is from Omicron. Yeah, that is a dominant variant. It is killing people, but if you have been vaccinated and boosted, you are protected from severe illness and disease. But Omicron is killing people. It is not a cold like one where you can just get it and get on with your life. The other thing to mention is we did hear from the start of this pandemic, go back 2 years, just get it over with, get the disease, everyone's going to get it. If you manage to delay getting infected to right now, to a vaccine world where you've been boosted, you will likely be at home, be unwell a few days, and get on with your life. If you got it a couple of years ago, you might have died of it or been in hospital. So delaying infection makes sense if you can. It's whether your employer lets you, your job lets you, your situation lets you be able to avoid this.
OK, we're going to have to leave it there, but thank you both very much for joining us. Lots of you getting in touch. Denny says, it's a tactic, remove the COVID restrictions, it's just smoke and mirrors, try and hide from the car crash standard that the Prime Minister is as a leader. He's lying, deceitful, pathetic. And
the worry for people is that, as she said there, Professor Sridhar said there, is that if you haven't got the clear restrictions, then you might be forced to go into work and not be able to take a decision.
On the other hand, Alan says this is really good news for the country. The only people it will affect badly are the unvaccinated. That's their choice, their consequences. Ian says if you look at the scientific side, every strain is getting milder. We have to get on with our lives.
Yeah, it's a tough one, and it looks like one we're going to have to try and balance ourselves as we go forward, isn't it?